How's everybody doing? Well, we're going to be doing a little more regular content here on VTH Extra, and in conjunction with my video on vlogging through history, my main channel, where I talked about some of the iconic memories from the 1980s for those of us who grew up in the 80s, I thought it might be fun to go to Tiermaker and talk about some of the best remembered films of the 1980s. I did not create the list as far as the movies that are in this. This was a pre-made tier maker selection of movies. What I've done though is I've created my own version of the tiers themselves for my particular style of how I'm going to rank these. So these are all considered already to be pretty good movies. So it's not like there's any that are going to be like, this was awful, right? So what I've decided to do is I've decided to rank them with the top tier being, it's a movie I'll watch every time. So if I'm flipping through the channels and this movie is on, I will watch it no matter where it is in the movie. I'm going to watch the rest of it. Second tier would be worth a rewatch or two. Like, it's something I wouldn't go out of my way to watch every time, but I'll probably rewatch it a time or two at some point because it was good enough to do that. Something that was a good movie that I remember thinking, yeah, it was a good movie, but I wouldn't necessarily go back and intentionally want to watch it again. Meh means it was just like, not good, not bad. It was just kind of there. And then no thanks are movies I just genuinely did not care for at all. And there probably won't be too many on this list of those. So as always, I love to hear input from other folks. So you let me know what I get right, what I get wrong in the comment section below. What would you do differently as far as how you rank these? And I'm just going to take these right in order of how they are on here. And it looks like this, I'm just looking to see because all I can see is the little icon, so I can't necessarily tell exactly what they are. I'm guessing that first, we'll go to that one later on. Let's go to the original Top Gun. Now, obviously, a new Top Gun just came out and was a huge success at the box office. The original was very popular. For me, Top Gun's one of those movies I've seen a couple of times now, and I really enjoyed, but it's not one if I was flipping through the channels and I saw that it was on, that I would intentionally sit down and watch it again. So for me, Top Gun, and that might anger some people, is a worth a rewatch or two type of thing. It's got iconic moments, right? Like, I feel the need for speed, and talk to me, Goose, and all these iconic things, and it's probably made a resurgence now because of the popularity of the second movie. But so it looks like this right here, I think we've got Empire Strikes Back and then Return of the Jedi as far as Star Wars movies go, right? So Empire Strikes Back, absolutely a watch every time. Definitely considered to be one of the best of the Star Wars movies. Probably considered, I think, almost universally considered to be the best of the original trilogy. For me personally, I think the best Star Wars movie ever made to this point has to be Rogue One, but Empire Strikes Back, fantastic. I am not old enough to remember this one being out in theaters. I think I was only 3 when it came out. Original came out the year I was born, but I do remember going to see Return of the Jedi in the theaters. So we'll go ahead and rank that one. And for me, that's worth a rewatch or two, but it's not like one that in fact, it was on the other day and I found myself watching it. So yeah, that's one that goes in the rewatch or two category for me. All right, let's see what we got here. What else? Die Hard. Oh my gosh. The best Christmas movie of all time. And that probably ranks in my top 10 movies of all time that I will watch every single time it's on. I mean, this was one of the ones that made Bruce Willis a big star. And it's, for many of us, the first real introduction we had to the glory of the acting of Alan Rickman as Hans Gruber. For me, Hans Gruber in Die Hard and then the Sheriff of Nottingham and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves were like two of the defining acting roles of my young life that I can remember watching and just being enthralled with. Fantastic movie from start to finish. So many good things. I will watch that absolutely every time that it's on. Okay, let's get into a couple that I'm not a huge fan of. I'm not really that into horror movies. Some that are more technically kind of thrillers I am kind of into. But I think this is a remake of The Thing. The original, I think, was much older. I just was not a fan at all of that movie. Just didn't care for it. Never really got into it. I can barely remember watching it the first time, and I certainly didn't want to watch it again after that. Same goes for The Evil Dead. Now, I was into some of the kind of those zombie movies that came out in my childhood. Night of the Living Dead, for example, I really enjoyed. But The Evil Dead, I didn't really care for that one all that much. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, to me, is the best by far of all of the Indiana Jones movies. I just watched it again the other day. So many classic lines. For me, the best line in that movie is when Sean Connery, who plays Henry Jones Sr., Indiana's father. Interesting, they're not really that far apart in age, but he grabs the arm of the German officer who keeps hitting him, and he says, "It tells me that goose-stepping morons like yourself should try reading books instead of burning them." I love that quote so much. But there's so many just amazing moments in that movie. That is one I've probably seen 20 times, and I'll easily watch it 20 more without a doubt. All right, what else do we have here? Platoon. Platoon was a good movie, and for somebody like me who's really into history, I'm disappointed that that's not one I would want to watch more often. It was good, but it's not one I'd really ever rewatch. Then again, I'm not really that much into like the Vietnam era stuff, I guess. And this one's gonna upset people too, I think. But Scarface for me was just meh. Man, I love De Niro, or Pacino. I shouldn't say De Niro. Pacino in The Godfather, right? I mean, I probably had seen The Godfather a couple times before I realized that was Al Pacino, because, you know, he didn't have that scratchy voice and he was so young in that. But for me, I just really never got into Scarface all that much. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? No thanks. I think when I was a kid, I probably liked it. And, you know, the whole sexy cartoon bunny thing, I guess. But not a huge fan of that one either. Now, Fast Times at Ridgemont High is one that I've probably seen 5 or 6 times now. And it's not one I'd recommend because it's kind of a little risque and kind of goes against my preferred kind of movie today. It's not one I'd watch now, but overall, I mean, it's classic, iconic. You've got a very small role by Nicolas Cage, I think still going by his real name, Nicholas Coppola, in that one. Sean Penn, obviously, the iconic role of Jeff Spicoli. You've got Judge Reinhold in that one. Oh my gosh, that's just one of those. The history teacher, Mr. Hand, in that is so great. There's so much I love about that one. All right, what else do we have here? So, Goonies, directed by a local guy for me, Chris Columbus. I think he directed, maybe he wrote it. I know he also directed a lot of like really popular 80s and 90s movies. But a graduate of Warren John F. Kennedy High School, which is like 5 miles from where I grew up. A lot of the people in my town went to Warren JFK. That's worth a rewatch or two. I wouldn't put it in the watch every time category, but so good. Okay, Beetlejuice for me is worth a rewatch or two, and there is a Beetlejuice 2 that's coming out next year. Michael Keaton will be back in the role of Beetlejuice, along with, I believe, Lydia will be making a reappearance in that one, and Delia as well. But that's one of those ones that's a pretty iconic movie from the 80s, really popular, and of course it's seen a resurgence because there's a fantastic musical Beetlejuice, which I think is way better than the movie. The musical's so good. Alex Brightman originated the role on Broadway. We just saw it here. Also, we saw it on Broadway, but also saw it on the tour in Cleveland, and it was great there too. It's not like watch every time for me, but it's worth a rewatch or two. Okay, what else do we have here? We've got The Breakfast Club. For me, that's a good movie. It's an iconic movie of the 80s. It's one that a lot of people have watched several times. I thought it was good once and had some very memorable roles and parts. And growing up in the 80s, I can see why a lot of high school kids in the 80s especially would relate to that film. But it's not one I'd like go out of my way to watch again, I don't think. What else do we have here? Terminator, the original Terminator. Again, that was like upset some people for me to say it this way, but it's a good movie, and I've probably seen it more than once, but it's not one that I'd go back and revisit every so often. All right, again, kind of keeping with my not really caring for thrillers and horror movies, The Shining for me is going to go in meh. That would probably upset my daughter, who's really into Stephen King, but I think Stephen King's best stuff is his drama stuff. Things like The Green Mile and Shawshank Redemption and Stand By Me, which we're going to get to. Those are all Stephen King stories that I think are some of his best stuff, and they're not horrors. So The Shining was like, it's got Jack Nicholson in that very memorable role, and that part you see right there on the screen where he says, "Here's Johnny," as he breaks through the bathroom door, but just not really that crazy about it. Big, same thing. Tom Hanks, one of his earliest roles, he plays this kid who makes a wish on one of those wishing machines at a carnival and wakes up in an adult body, and it's just kind of the fish out of water story kind of thing. And it was all right, but I was never really that crazy about it. Raiders of the Lost Ark is another watch every time for me. I believe all three of the original Indiana Jones movies came out in the 80s, though I don't see Temple of Doom on the screen here, maybe because that's probably the worst of the three original movies. Still way better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, though. So good. Raiders of the Lost Ark, come on. There's so much to love about that one. I don't need to get into that one too much. Poltergeist, when I was a kid, was the scariest thing I had ever seen in my life. I'm going to put it in the meh category just because I don't really care for those kinds of movies. But, man, I was so scared. And rest in peace to the girl who played the little girl in that. Died at like the age of 13. Helen O'Rourke was, I think, her name. Some kind of a stomach ailment. I've been to her grave in Hollywood. Very sad what happened with her. But, just not crazy about that one. Okay, what else do we have here? We've got 16 Candles. Another meh for me. That was one I think I enjoyed as a kid. I think there's probably some stuff in there today that would be considered pretty racist when it comes to like the character of Long Duck Dong. But at the time, it's a pretty classic 80s teenager movie, again starring Molly Ringwald. It was pretty good. Untouchables. Here's the problem I have with Untouchables. I love Kevin Costner. I love Robert De Niro, who are both in that movie. Sean Connery is in that movie. I mean, these are three of the biggest actors of our time, right? But maybe it's the historian in me that just doesn't like that they played so fast and loose with the story and fictionalized so much of it. But that's why I give it meh and not no thanks. It's all right. I'm not crazy about it. Okay, Full Metal Jacket. Here's the thing for me with Full Metal Jacket, and it's a good movie. Full Metal Jacket, to me, is a lot like Saving Private Ryan, where there's almost two distinct movies. One that's really good, and one that's kind of forgettable. Saving Private Ryan obviously has that first 20 minutes or so with the D-Day landings that is so memorable and the part that everybody talks about the most, right? And that's fantastic. The rest of the movie for me is just kind of all right. Full Metal Jacket's the same way. All the stuff that takes place in the beginning with R. Lee Ermey as the almost sadistic drill sergeant and some of the stuff he says. You have Vincent D'Onofrio playing kind of the unhinged private that ends up doing some pretty terrible things at the end. That is an incredible opening to that movie. The rest, where they go to Vietnam, is very forgettable for me. I'll still put it in the good movie category. Karate Kid is a classic. Again, seen a resurgence because of the series that came out first on YouTube and then on Netflix. For me, worth a rewatch or two. Mr. Miyagi, obviously great. Daniel LaRusso, who dude is in his 60s now. Ralph Macchio, who plays that character, he's like in his early 60s, right around 60, and he looks like he's 40, if that. I mean, he has aged so well. But really, really good movie. Great story. A lot of memorable quotes from that one, memorable scenes, enough that it got a resurgence here now with a brand new series based on the original. So that's great. Stand By Me is a watch every time. That's a Stephen King story. I think some of his best work. You've got River Phoenix and Jerry O'Connell's in that. One of the earliest acting roles for Kiefer Sutherland, playing one of the bad guys as a teenager in that one. Narrated by Richard Dreyfuss, who's one of my favorite actors. Such a great story, such a great coming of age story. And for me, being about those kids' age when that movie came out, it was just kind of a very defining story in my life. Just something I really found myself connecting to. So good. Highly recommend that one if you haven't seen it yet. A Christmas Story, another classic. That's worth a rewatch or two for me. The house is up in Cleveland here in Northeast Ohio, not too far. I've never been to it, but Ralphie, and so many memorable roles and memorable scenes again that people talk about. It's become kind of the part of our culture now, that sort of thing. So really, really good one. The Princess Bride to me is a good movie with some really good scenes and some memorable, the Battle of Wits, Mandy Patinkin with Inigo Montoya, You Killed My Father, Prepare to Die, stuff like that, really good. But to me, I was never really obsessed with it the way I think a lot of people have become. Back to the Future is a worth a rewatch or two, maybe even more than that, but it's not a watch every single time for me one, but again, so good. One of my favorite movies growing up, Doc Brown and Marty McFly, and of course the two sequels I think were very good as well. Airplane, to me, is a good movie. It's like the classic 80s spoof movie. It's got all these classic lines like, "Surely you can't be serious. I am serious. And stop calling me Shirley." Stuff like that. But that was one I watched a lot as a kid. I think when I was probably 12 or 13, it was a watch every time one for me, but not so much anymore. And then you had a sequel to it with William Shatner commanding a base on the moon, which has some really classic parts as well, and I think was every bit as good as the original. Really good sequel. Aliens, to me, I never really got into, but it's obviously sparked a lot of sequels, a whole franchise, so a lot of people really enjoy that one. Caddyshack, a classic 80s comedy that to me was very meh. And I love a good comedy. Listen, I love all like the kind of really cheesy Adam Sandler comedies that came out in the 90s, but I just never could get into Caddyshack. I don't know why. I never could. Raging Bull's a no thanks for me. I know it's a classic. I know that it was like really, it's really highly regarded and it's got some classic acting performances and things like that. But give me Rocky any day, and not really into other kinds of boxing movies for the most part. What else do we have? We have E.T., good movie. Right at the early part of the 80s when that came out. Did really, really well at the box office. You got a little young Drew Barrymore in one of her first acting roles. Good movie. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, watch every time. As a kid growing up in the 80s, there was no movie that I think I enjoyed more than Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Matthew Broderick's defining role of his career. That and Glory, which almost were filmed at around the same time, which fascinates me that he did one and the other, and both were pulled off pretty well. Ghostbusters is a watch every time for me as well. That is a good 80s movie with a lot of comedy in it there. You got comedians in there like Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray in that one. So good. Fantastic movie. What else we got? Gremlins. Gremlins was good. I enjoyed Gremlins. It was a movie that was like kind of a scary movie, but not too scary, and didn't take itself too seriously. It had some funny parts. Was big in the pop culture for a lot of the reasons some of these other movies were as well. What else do we have here? I have to look and see what some of these other ones are because I can't quite tell. Okay, so this is Risky Business. That's got that really popular scene where Tom Cruise is in a shirt and underwear and lip syncs to old time rock and roll. But you know what? For me, it was a very meh movie. Maybe it's the age I was at when it came out. I couldn't really appreciate it, but I've just never really cared for that one all that much. It's not a no thanks one for me. But that, Nightmare on Elm Street, now that was pretty good as far as 80s horror movies go. Freddy Krueger kind of scared me to death and made people afraid to go to sleep, right? Because when you go to sleep, that's when he would come and get you in your dreams. Rambo, worth a rewatch or two. For me, Rambo, I think 4 was the best one of that series. But Rambo, actually, the original Rambo was just good. I think the original Rambo was the weakest of that whole series to me. I don't know. This is Spinal Tap. Never really cared for, never really got into. And again, maybe it was just the age I was when that one came out. I have no idea what this movie here is. Is that one Heather's? I don't know. But I don't know what either of those two are, which means I don't remember them well enough to be able to rank them. So there you have it. For me, the watch every time movies are Empire Strikes Back, Die Hard, the 2 Indiana Jones movies, Last Crusade and Raiders of the Lost Ark, Stand By Me, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Ghostbusters. Let me know what I got right, what I got wrong in the comment section below. Thanks for watching.